All right, well, welcome everybody. We've got around 11 or 12 of us here to chat post-legislative briefing. So as you all know, Matt Krogman is our lobbyist for the Chamber, BEDC, where it does some work with Visit Brookings as well. And we also have Tim Reed, our senator from District 7. Like Matt said, we're just going to do conversational style recap of the session, ask questions, bring up bills that you had heard of. Don't be afraid if you're not sure of the name or number of the bill. If you just give the topic, I'm sure we can figure it out and have a conversation about it. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Matt.
All right. Thanks, Kelsey. Good to see everyone. Nice to join you from my office again, rather than the dungeon and pier. So thanks for taking the time to get on. Senator Reed, feel free to, and anyone else, feel free to hop in with any questions and anything I'm missing or anything like that. Otherwise, I thought we'd just start with kind of an overview of session and then hit on some of the topics that were business related, economic development related, those types of topics. So first of all, probably for the first time in at least a handful of years, this was a fantastic year for the legislature. They worked very well together. I know it wasn't easy. Both had to compromise on several issues, but for the first time in quite a while, I feel like they did. Leadership on both chambers seemed to work very well together. They got bills through in a timely fashion. There wasn't any late nights like previous years where they've had to go to midnight to get through their bill list. Everything stayed on time. They seemed to work real well together. And I think the product speaks for itself as far as what was accomplished this legislative session. So that was great to get back to that. And that's thanks in large part to the leadership of both chambers working together and getting maybe the right people chairing committees and things like that. So overall, a great session. This year, we had a total of 451 bills. And the 2022 session, there was a total of 553. So we had 100 fewer bills this year than what we did last session, which is one of the reasons it allowed it maybe to function a little more smoothly. That does not include joint resolutions and some other things that legislators have to deal with. So still dealing with 500 different things that they have to either dispose of or pass. They do a good job of getting that done in the time frame, 38-day time frame that they have. So as far as some things that were accomplished, obviously you've seen in the media, they did come to an agreement on a sales tax cut. It's an across the board sales tax cut from 4.5 to 4.2%. It only affects the state sales tax. I know I've had a couple people ask, does the city have to reduce by the same percentage? They don't. Cities continue to charge what they currently charge and collect in sales tax. I shouldn't say charge, what they collect in sales tax. The state's portion is going from 4.5% to 4.2%. One of the agreements they had to come to, Representative Carr was the main sponsor on this on the House side, and he was adamant about not having a sunset, an ending date for this tax. But he gave on that in order to get the cut through. So this technically sunsets in 4 years. And I think that's a prudent idea. I really do. The sales tax on food idea might end up on the ballot in the 2024 election. If that's the case, that's another huge tax reduction of about estimated at 104 million right now. And quite honestly, we can be confident that our income and all of that is going to continue to increase and maintain, but there's no assurances of that. One of the big differences with having a sunset or not is the position that it puts the legislature in. If in 4 years they have to make a decision whether to continue this sales tax, they don't have to vote to increase the sales tax. It automatically happens. So with having the 4-year sunset there, they just don't remove that. If we're in a position where where we can continue the 4.2%, they get to vote to continue a tax a lower tax for the citizens. And so it puts the legislators in a better position when that time has to come, if and when that time comes. So they did accomplish the goal of getting a sales tax through this year. And we'll talk about a few things that weren't accomplished in this session, which included a couple other ideas. But as it stands, starting July 1st, 4.2% on the state sales tax, ending in 4 years unless the legislature takes action on that. So a couple other things. Obviously, they passed another balanced budget, which is required in the Constitution, but our legislature, we know not all legislators in the state do that. South Dakota accomplished it again. A couple highlights in that budget. A 7% increase in funding for school districts, a 7% increase in funding for state employees, among several other good things in the budget, but those are probably the two main things, the 7%. If you recall, the governor, if you recall, the governor had proposed 5% increases. The legislature ended up increasing those to 7%. We'll get to some of the, so another balanced, good budget and good increase. I think school districts came out of this feeling very happy. So let's also not forget that 9 days into session, we passed $200 million for infrastructure for workforce housing. This legislature passed this. It kind of gets forgotten about because it happened so quickly. But another thing that was accomplished in this session that was fantastic. If you're interested in that topic, South Dakota Housing issued their proposed rules for the program yesterday, and there'll be a public hearing on them sometime in mid-April. So if you're interested in how that program and what their proposal is for that program right now, that you can find those online. I'm not exactly certain where, but I'm sure you can find them. Their goal is to be able to start accepting applications they accept applications in 2 ways. One starting June 1st of this year, and then a second December 1st of this year as well. So, so that was accomplished again this year. Senate Bill 120 increases the value of property that can be owned by an industrial development corp that is exempt from paying property taxes. Currently, it's a value of $750,000. That's getting increased to $2.5 million, which is great for our economic development corporations as they're trying to recruit businesses to our area. House Bill 1011 reduced, this happened pretty early as well, but it reduces contribution rates to the South Dakota Unemployment Reemployment Fund for businesses, so that's good. And SDSU wise, increase the amount of the Opportunity Scholarship, which is something our area has been pushing for quite a while. Got an additional $3 million to finish off lab space at the bioproducts facility. And then the facilities at Northern State and Black Hills University that are important for our nursing program. They didn't get exactly what they wanted, but they each got $1.5 million so they can continue the work moving forward on those buildings there. So kind of a brief summary. I mean, we could talk all day. I've tried to limit this a little bit so we aren't here all day, but kind of a brief summary of the more probably important things for our area and our area businesses that got accomplished this year. A few things that didn't. House Bill 1109, which would have allowed bid districts to increase the occupation tax at hotels and other places, that did pass the House. Even it was authority to raise a tax, so they ruled it didn't require a 2/3 vote to get through the chamber. And it passed the Senate in 1916, which isn't 2/3. It passed the House right on 2/3. The governor decided to veto it, and it requires 2/3 vote in order to override the governor's veto. So it got through both chambers. Governor vetoed it, and the House failed to override the veto, so it never went back to the Senate to try to override the veto because it does take 2/3 of both chambers. So that ultimately will not be, the bid districts won't have authorization to increase the occupational tax. The governor might have had a pretty rough session. A few other things that were in the news that didn't happen. We didn't remove the sales tax on food. We know how adamant she was about that idea. We didn't increase the paid family leave program for state employees and offer it to be able to offer it to private businesses as well. Didn't create a program to review ag land purchases by foreign entities. There was a whole system that the governor wanted to set up for that. I think all three of these items were mentioned in her state of the state as among others that she wanted to pursue. Then none of them went through. So that's rough, but we also have to keep in mind, I mean, we aren't getting a sales tax cut if the governor didn't set up these cuts in her budget. It allowed the legislature, they just disagreed where the cut should happen. I mean, none of this happens if the governor proposes a different type of budget than what she proposed, and she deserves a lot of credit for that. So while it was a little tough on individual ideas that she had, the budget I think that she set was very good. So the other, and also the other thing that didn't happen was any kind of property tax relief. So there were the three ideas as far as where to cut taxes: overall sales tax, food, or property. Obviously, the legislature decided on the overall sales tax. So nothing as far as cutting property taxes, nothing as far as cutting food taxes. And that's pretty much what I have as far as ideas that were out there. House Bill 11, 17, and 18, I know were the South Dakota Small Business Development Center and appropriation to help small and mid-sized manufacturers. There was an attempt to move those into the general funds and have them be funded for 2.5 years and then have to go through the budget process. Currently, they are existing and they get funded through the future funds. Nothing changed with those. Those did not pass, so they'll continue to be funded through future funds. As far as veto, yeah.
Matt, I'm sorry, that one actually, the reason they were tabled is they did get into the G bill. So they got into, so they're fully funded now. It doesn't look that way online, so I see why you thought that, but that they got tabled because there was motion sheets that put it into the ongoing budget. So they're fully funded here into the future.
Thank you. As far as governor vetoes so far, she's vetoed 4 of them. 3 of them, the bid district we already hit on. One of the vetoes she did was vetoing the approval of adopting the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC code, which has a major effect on how banks do business amongst other businesses. I think I think it's gotten a little tied up in crypto issue and that hopefully it's something that the legislature can override as far as that veto's concerned. Nothing else really. With SDSU, we have a program for how to make beer, that kind of thing. They try to reduce who's authorized to basically what they call sip and spit alcohol on a campus who's under 21. I think right now it's 20. This would have reduced it to 18. Not a big deal. And I don't think it's anything that was huge to SDSU. So that's kind of the summary that I have put together. Senator Reed, did you have others that I haven't brought up?
Well, just in your last comment, that was an Augie bill. It wasn't done by the Board of Regents. It was Augie that wanted that. I guess there was some students from South Dakota Mines that also wanted it. I may have missed some of this when you said it. Just want to make sure that there's a fight. Did you talk about the 775, Matt? When you were talking
about the 7.7, not the 5.
Okay, so usually those are all tied together. We call them the big 3. It's K-12 education, state employees, and then Medicaid. Those are the big 3. So 7% to the education, 7% to state employees, which means a 7% increase then for employees at SDSU. Now, when they do that, it can cause tuition to go up because only a certain amount is paid by the state. And so then the students have to pick the rest of that up. There was money found in the budget ongoing to hold tuition flat. And so there will not be an increase in tuition, which is good for us and good for SDSU, good for us. The 5%, usually those are all tied together. The reason why we could do 5% for the providers is that there was money provided to bring them to what's called 100% of methodology. And that was $30 million. So it doesn't affect the hospitals and clinics and such. They only got 5%, the 5% increase. They weren't brought up to 100%. They were given some increases, but not up to the 100%. 100% is for like your community service providers, nursing homes, some places like that. And so to bring them to 100% methodology, that's $30 million ongoing to help with that situation. So that's why they didn't get the full 7% increases, because we were able to bring them up. Some of them were as low as 50% methodology, and we got them up to 100% methodology, which is just the process they go to figure out the costs. And so those are some of the little more detail about what went on with the ongoing budget. There's also $30 million. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the right number. $18.1 million given to all the universities for what's called M&R. And so this is above the normal percentage they get. And that'll help like renovate a building. I don't know if it's a few floors or a building up at SDSU. I'm not sure exactly which project they funded with the money. They didn't get all 18 million. That was spread across the different universities. So that was really an important one. There was two big pieces. This is one-time money, that was left over after last year that I was talking about with the universities and such. We allocated 112 million to the initial funding for a men's prison, to work through the process of being able to build a new prison. That prison right now, I think we've got $350 million. So we may have put more into it at the end of the year. I don't have that number, but they're planning on that being anywhere from 500 million to $1 billion to build that new prison for the men's prison. They also put $60 million into a new prison that'll be in Rapid City for the women. Too bad we got to spend money on those things, but it is what it is. They're going to upgrade the accounting system for the state. Very archaic. And hold on to this so you don't get too excited. $70 million to upgrade that system. That includes labor, because there will be people that will, have to go on just for that project as they're doing it. Also, believe it or not, the South Dakota CARS system, which is used for you to register cars, license, etc. We had to put $25 million to rebuild that system, which is failing. It crashes all the time. And a lot of that has to do with security, cybersecurity. I don't think we want people to be able to break in and get the information that's on, that South Dakota CARS. And so it was very archaic systems. They had to upgrade that. So there was a lot that was done internally with the state too, that you don't necessarily feel right down to Brookings, but it's important for a state government to keep functioning. So I don't know if there's anything, you guys have any questions?
Dan, I saw your hand up earlier.
Yeah. So I heard on NPR this morning or noon or whenever that there are like 75 bills that were passed but haven't yet been signed. What's the implication of that and how does that work itself out?
So the process, as I understand it, is there's a date that they're delivered to her desk, and the governor has 10 days to sign or veto. If they do nothing through that 10 days, if they don't act on the bill, it automatically becomes law without her signature. So she has 10 days from when the bill was delivered to her for her to take an action on it. Veto day is coming up on the 27th. So that's when the legislature meets for their final day to take up any vetoes that they might have or that they might get from the governor. But basically that's how it works. She has 10 days to act on it. If there's no action, then it becomes law. Pocket veto is not a thing in South Dakota. So
yeah, I had understood it backwards, that the 75 bills would die and then have to be taken up on veto day if she didn't take action, but it's the other way around. Okay, thank you.
Just, that's a lot of bills still to be remaining. Couple things are going on. One is, at least on the Senate side, because the lieutenant governor is the presiding officer that has to sign the bills. They wanted more time to review the bills, and so he was holding bills and not signing them until we realized it and kind of got on him about it. And so there's still a concern here. I'm sure they'll get through them, but there should not be this many bills this late in the process.
And the budget is one of those bills that is still waiting action.
Yes.
Oh, and then
Yeah.
just as a side note, I put a link to the South Dakota housing rules or proposed rules for the infrastructure money in the chat.
Thank you. Any other questions anyone has?
If nobody has any questions, and just for everybody's information, and Steve may want to jump in on this, her vetoing the universal commercial code bill is ridiculous, to be honest with everybody. That bill is setting up so businesses have the ability to better use electronic or digital forms of money. It has gotten so twisted in the press and through certain groups. For example, I saw someone forwarded me the email that caused them to speak out against the bill. And in that bill, in that email, it talked about this Forbes article, which Forbes is a reputable magazine, talking about the issues with going to what's considered a central bank digitized money, digital money. And what's happened here is there probably is some issues with going to that, but that's not what this bill is about. The only part that's in that bill that has to do with central bank, digital money, is that there's two countries right now that's their form of currency, two South African companies. So if anybody in the country, and especially within South Dakota, is trying to do business with them, there are issues. And so if a business wants to accept that from them, there was problems with doing that. It said nothing about the United States going on that form, on going to that. The bill has nothing to do about that, and it's getting twisted in the press. And the other thing that it does is, when you're dealing with money, and Steve, if I get anything wrong here, let me know, because it's a complicated subject. When you deal with money, you put it in your hand, right? And so crypto is starting to be used as payment, but you can't hold it. It's a digital asset. And so this sets it up, for example, so you can actually figure out a way of using a digital asset, to when you like deposit money to be held because you have a loan. I don't know what the correct term is there, Steve, but so when that happens, right now you can't do that in any feasible way. So it just allows those type of things to be done. The governor vetoing it, she vetoed it because she thought it would inhibit if people wanted to start to use cryptocurrency, and that's the furthest from the truth. And so I know you guys don't have too much to say. I just want to let you know that if you see some of this stuff, just you gotta make sure it's from a reliable source. And those poor sources have gotten a hold of the governor, and so she ended up vetoing it. I think a little bit of it is for show, because we have the supermajority needed to override her veto. But I think they're going to start to work us, not to not vote for it. And it could hinder business in South Dakota. I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, the only other thing I would say is, this is a little bit unusual from a UCC change perspective, because usually there's a couple of things within the change that are pretty innocuous and not really that important, really in the overall scheme of things. But this is a 100-page document, and I can't say I've read the whole thing. And so I'm speaking based on some other people's comments and some of that kind of thing. But the only other thing I would say is it doesn't really go into effect until July 1, 2024. And so if it doesn't pass, there will be the opportunity to look at it again next session, I'm sure, and sort out any of those inconsistencies and or truths or non-truths or however they're looked at from that perspective and bring that forward then.
I just have a quick question for you, Tim. And I haven't read the bill either, but I am familiar with UCC. And that's a uniform act that's adopted, I think, by every state in the nation. Are we proposing substantial changes from the Uniform Act, or were the changes just to update South Dakota based on the changes to the Uniform Act?
This came from the UCC Commission, I believe, and it's their recommended changes, Leanne, I believe is how it's proposed.
So what is proposed is that we adopt whatever the national standard is for the UCC. Okay,
Yeah, I think it's being presented to all states to be adopted, I think is how they're presenting it.
okay, thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys again this year and appreciate the feedback that you guys provide and when you reach out and that kind of thing. So I appreciate it. I think we had an overall very good session. Senator Reed, thanks for your service again this past session, and we'll see you again next year.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, so much for your hard work. He was out there advocating for Brookings and did a great job. I appreciate when I hear other chambers and other organizations that recognize Matt with Brookings, and they just say what a good job he's doing. So keep up your great work too. And Tim, thank you for being out there and also doing such a great job representing our District 7. Any closing
Thank you.
remarks from anyone?
May I say something that's not related to what we're talking about? I
Sure,
just,
I'm gonna stop the recording.